Well, thank you everyone for coming to this talk with recent graduates and about what we're up to essentially. So we've got 4 panel members, including myself. We should have another one coming, but he's running a bit late, but we'll see how that goes. So I've just got a quick, brief PowerPoint. So I've just pinched Roz's Twitter card for the start. And then the plan for the talk, I'm going to ask the panelists to give us a brief introduction of what their degree was in, any postgraduate degrees they've done, or what they're doing now. And then we'll hopefully get into a bit of discussion between the 4, hopefully 5 of us. And then after that, we'll open to questions. So start thinking now if you've got anything you want to ask. So this is the list. So we've got Hannah, who did sport and exercise science at Loughborough. We've got Dan, who did biomedical sciences at Newcastle. We've got Ed, hopefully, who did biochemistry at Newcastle as well. We've got Tommy, who did pharmacology at Newcastle, and myself, who also did biomedical sciences at Newcastle. So, because she's top of the list, I'm going to start with Hannah and just ask her to say a little bit about her degree, what kind of made her choose that and what she's doing now, if that's okay, Hannah.
Yeah. So as Eva said, I went to Loughborough. I did 4 years at Loughborough studying sport and exercise science. That included a placement year where I worked for a biomedical research group. So I worked for the Leicester Diabetes Centre, and that was essentially working around preventing type 2 diabetes. So I worked on 2 large randomised control trials during my time there. And then since that, I've decided to go into teaching. So I'm currently training on a skit course to become a PE teacher. But the course I'm on is PE with EBAC. So my EBAC subject that I chose to do was biology, but in the school that I'm at, you don't have specialist biology teachers, they're science teachers. So I'm doing PE with science. So yeah.
Thank you. Dan, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. So hello everyone, I'm Dan. I also went to Newcastle University. I did a bachelor's degree in biomedical science, developed a lot of valuable skills, but at the end decided it wasn't quite for me as a career. So I did a master's in computer science, and I'm now a security engineer working in Edinburgh for a cybersecurity consulting company. So yeah.
Thank you. And Tommy?
Sorry, hi, my name is Tommy. So I went to Newcastle and I studied pharmacology. I'm currently in medical school at the moment, but after my degree, I did work in healthcare communications, but yeah, that's my training.
And what is it that you're doing now, Tommy? Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm currently in medical school. I'm in my 2nd year studying, St. George's in London.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm kind of going to chair the panel and be on it a little bit. So I also did biomedical sciences and kind of went the non-traditional route from that, and now I work in transport and logistics and shipping cargo from the UK to all over the world. So yeah. So firstly, I was going to ask the panel, what made you choose kind of biology related degrees? What was it something at school that interested you, or you knew what job you wanted to go into? So that was kind of the route to do. Hannah, do you want to go?
So me and Eve actually went to school together, and I think she can agree with me that I was very indecisive when I was at school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I feel like everybody else had their careers decided and I was a little bit in the dark. I enjoyed everything. I enjoyed English, art, PE, science. So it's a bit like, which route am I going to go down? And I think having seen my dad go into teaching, that definitely opened doors in that sense, and that had kind of like a window into what the profession was like. And although he always told me for years, don't go into teaching, that's the last thing I want you to do, because it is such a stressful job. I have obviously ended up going down that route regardless. But I think with PE and it being slightly less marking heavy, and you have got a little bit more time in terms of that, I think it is slightly less stressful than say English or other subjects. So I think I always had teaching in the back of my mind. But in terms of picking to go down the science route rather than the arts route, I think I liked just the clarity of it all, and that you had a definitive right and wrong. And I think I know in myself that in my English subjects, I definitely was a bit too flowery and went around the houses a bit too much. So I liked the straight and narrow of science subjects. So, and I was very passionate about sport as well. So sports science just made a lot of sense to me.
Tommy, what made you choose pharmacology for starters?
It was kind of an accident actually, because when I applied to Newcastle, I applied for genetics, and then because at Newcastle everyone has the same first year, so so I came into it not really knowing a lot about anything, but I think as the year progressed, and then I found that I had an interest in pharmacology, and it's like, oh, this is actually something I am interested in and I'm actually good at. So I thought, I'll make the switch, and that's why I ended up doing pharmacology.
And was that a similar situation for you, Dan? Because at Newcastle, we, as Tommy said, the first year is the same. So everybody kind of that does biomed, pharmacology, genetics, everything, what else I forgot, biochem, physiology, there might be another one. And we all do the same first year. And then at the end, you get to pick if you want to stay on the route you were on or change. So Dan started off doing biochem and then changed to biomed. What was it that swung it for you there, Dan?
I'll be honest with you, I looked at one of the past papers and decided, nope, I'm going to do biomed instead. So that was actually the reason why I stopped doing biochemistry. But I think biomed, it stays a little bit more broad. If you look at some of the other ones like pharmacology, you do start to get a little bit more specialized when you do things like that, even biochemistry. Biomed was still very broad, and it gives you a little bit of an insight into how I ended up in computing, because I was never really sure what aspect of biology I wanted to go into. So for me, dip into as many as I can, stay broad, and then maybe at the end of it, I'll come to a conclusion on what I actually want to do. One of the modules, the optional modules in biomed, was bioinformatics. I don't know if you picked that one. But that was kind of how I started to get into computing, and a little bit more statistics, a little bit more data analysis, working with computers, a little bit of coding. So even though I don't really use any biology now, certainly my gateway into computing was through biology and bioinformatics.
Okay, thank you. I've just realised I've made a massive error. We've got Dr. Karis Watts, who was first year lecturer in microbiology and immunology, and that was one I forgot from first year, so that was one. Well, the option. In terms of why I picked biomed, it was kind of a similar thing of the broadness of it. Instead of, I remember coming to an open day at Newcastle, and there was like stats on like the employment things of what graduates do afterwards. And there was such a mix from biomed, and because I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, I liked that there was such a, you could kind of go anywhere with it, and everyone kind of spoke a lot about transferable skills, and that science degrees are kind of well looked upon in most areas of employment. So that was kind of one of the things that did it for me, and also just being interested in science. Obviously picked biology and chemistry A levels, so there had to be some kind of interest there. So following on from that, to what extent do you think for starters, undergraduate kind of biology related degree prepared you for what you're doing now? Tommy, do you want to go for that one?
Yeah, sure. So definitely, well, I think doing my undergrad in pharmacology has definitely helped. So I'm in medical school, so I find that a lot of the stuff I'm doing now is, I have done before, but I think, having that extra knowledge has really given me an advantage. Outside of like school, like when I was working, well, still working corporate, it was kind of interesting seeing like, the mix of like, science and, how that works and, how that works and how, pharma companies, need that knowledge to be able to like to communicate to different stakeholders, whether that's like healthcare professionals or even patients. So yes, I would say like I think, my background has definitely given me a lot of options and, yeah, that's all I'll say.
As well as the kind of bioinformatics thing, was there anything else that you kind of can pinpoint that helped you with what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So in the first year, I don't think I had a single lab that actually ended up with like the result I wanted. I failed every single lab in the first year. And then, progressively I got better and better. But what I learned from that is kind of, things do have to be very, very precise, and you do have to do things absolutely correctly to the T, following each step. Otherwise, you're not going to get the result. With these experiments, like PCR, it's all about those fine margins. Otherwise, it's not going to kind of get to the final stage that you want. And with coding, if you have a single line that's not right, then probably the whole code isn't going to work at all. So just kind of that level and that attention to detail is something that I use every single day. So especially in cybersecurity, where if there is an error in the code or whatever you're making, then that's a security flaw. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you as well, because we graduated in 2021, Dan and I were both in Caroline's tutoring group, but our projects were all online. And I found that although I didn't get the lab experience that, say, graduates before got, because the projects were completely online, it was very data heavy. Did you find that kind of the independent study of that and just the handling such large data sets, maybe kind of more than we would have done, getting our own lab results has helped?
Yeah, so I finished my computer science research project about 4 months ago. So my head is just full of that, and it's hard for me to remember doing the biomed research project. Yeah, but mine was a lot of coding. It was very, very data heavy. I mean, it was all, you couldn't do any wet lab work, could you? So there was very, very limited options with that, which for me, I think I was going to go down that route anyway, so it didn't necessarily affect me as much. But that's certainly like something that a lot of my peers at the time did say. It was just a lot more data heavy than they perhaps would have perceived at the start.
Yeah, definitely. It felt like it was for me, because we kind of all went into this thinking that, you have that, you're not kind of solve the degree on the 12-week project, but it's such a huge part that you're kind of working towards to then be just kind of working in Excel and all sorts of other programs that I've never heard of, never used since, but it was interesting. Hannah, how do you think like sport and exercise has prepared you for?
A lot of it for me was just in terms of like inspiration, because having gone to Loughborough, a lot of the modules that I picked, so I did a lot of physiology, a lot of biochemistry and sports nutrition, and a lot of the research that was coming out of that just shocked me. And it was shocking me, and even though I was in the industry and I was actively looking up this information, and even I didn't know just how much genetics controls kind of like your weight, and how choices that you make in your early life can really dictate what's going to happen to you in the future. And I thought it's a real shame that that information isn't trickled down to the public and put into a form that the public can understand, and it's not just kept in these high spaces of academia, and that it is actually accessible. So that definitely inspired me to think I definitely want a job in a form of care, whether that's teaching or healthcare, just to help kind of like educate people around health and exercise and the importance of making the right decisions earlier in life, not only to help themselves, but if they have children, to instill the same kind of healthy habits within them. So yeah, that was just really, really great, really, really inspiring.
And I'm going to ask also, as Hannah said, we went to school together and we've been kind of friends ever since. But Hannah was about to start a master's in nutrition, and then you completely did a UE and then kind of said, no, I'm going to go into teaching. What was it that kind of swung that for you? What made you
Yeah, so I was going to do another master, well, a different master's in dietetics. And I'd basically done all my interviews, got all these offers, was set to go to Sheffield to start a master's in dietetics. And then at the last minute, I did do a bit of a U-turn. And it was from having spoken to registered dietitians and having that one-to-one conversation and actually talking about the reality of the job. And I realised that I wanted a job where I was on the ground, talking to people, delivering interventions, similar to what I'd done on my placement year at the diabetes centre. And I realised that once you become a registered dietitian, that's less the reality of the job. I think they do a lot more office work where you're actually coming up with your interventions and they're the ones doing all the legwork in the background, and it's your dietetic assistants who are on the ground delivering the interventions, speaking with the public. But I knew that an office job wouldn't suit me. I'm much better in a physical space, talking to people and getting involved practically. So yeah, I knew that I think I'd just burn out quite quickly in a job like that, and I think teaching suited me a bit more just because it is a bit more active and yeah, you're out and about all day. So yeah.
And in terms of kind of career progression, and obviously we're all pretty early on starting out kind of what we're doing, but where do you see kind of your careers going? Tommy, if you want to, obviously you're still in med school, but
Yeah,
where
just
do
looking
you
forward to finish at this point. Yeah, so I'm hoping to eventually graduate, and then I'm not sure what specialty, but I'm keeping my options very open at the moment.
Is there anything that kind of really sparks your interest at the moment?
It changes. So I'm currently on placement and it's on radiology, and I did not consider that as a specialty I would go into, but I think it's quite interesting, the different intersections as well between different specialties, because a lot rely on like radiology for diagnosis and even like prognosis as well as before like surgery. Yes, I think that's quite cool, but it changes. I mean, a couple of months ago, if you asked me, it was surgery. A couple of months before that was pediatrics. So yeah.
We'll see where you are then. Dan, where are you kind of hoping to go with?
It's hard to predict. I think the good thing about a field like tech is you can kind of make like a frog and just jump from lily pad to lily pad. You can go wherever you want. You can go horizontal, vertical, wherever. For me, I think I spent a lot of time, I spent about over a year as a tutor, so I'm quite good with talking to people. So I think at the moment I'm a security engineer, which is just kind of getting trained on some software and things like this. But I'd like to be more of a security consultant, which is more where you're talking to clients and kind of solving and talking about what the best like security option is for them. Which is, I do have training in that at the moment. I work with a few banks, just kind of like getting exposure to dealing with clients, which is not something you really get exposed to when you're at university. And if you're not in the public sector, then if you're in the private sector, like most people are, it's more about the numbers. It's more about finance. No matter where you are, no matter what industry you're working in, everyone has a budget. Everyone has to talk to clients. Everyone has to kind of, even in research, you have to prove that something is worth financing, and you have to speak to various bodies to do that. So I think, just using my skill of talking to people would be more on that client side.
Perfect, thank you. And bit of maybe a controversial question, but if you could go back to kind of your 17, 18-year-old self when we choose what you're doing, would you choose to do the degree that you did, your initial kind of biologically related degree? Hannah, do you want to go?
I think I would, yeah. I'd still do sports science, but I think potentially my placement year, as much as I absolutely loved it, I think at times I could have been stretched a little bit more, and having seen other placement years that other students did, I think I'd have probably just, I don't know, reassess whether that was the right one for me, especially having seen where I've gone now, because a lot of that was office work, and although I was interacting with the public, I think I could have potentially picked something a little bit more relevant, and I think going back I would have done that differently, particularly as well because I picked to do a placement that was unpaid, because within sports science, all the placements are unpaid, and they're few and far between to get one that is paid. But I think if I had have really pushed, I could have probably maybe got one that was paid, and it might have helped me out in the future, and I wouldn't have needed like as many part-time jobs and things like that, which meant I could focus my attention on my degree a little bit more. But yeah, I think I'd definitely still pick sport and exercise science. I had a great time at Loughborough, and it definitely was really useful, taught me a lot.
I remember, like, we've kind of previously discussed, like, I think I remember you saying, but this was when you were, I think, hoping to go into the dietetics like industry job, that you would have maybe picked different modules
Yeah
related to that. Does that still stand now you're in going into teaching, or
I think now that I'm going into teaching, I probably would have picked, we had some modules that were teaching and coaching, and I only did that for 1 year, and then I dropped it the next year, because you have to stand up in front of all your peers and deliver lessons, which I just hated the idea of, which is ironic now. But yeah, I think in my final year, because I did have that in mind going into dietetics, I did then pick a lot of modules related to that, so I kept it very, very sciencey. And perhaps now that I've gone into teaching, I think I might have aimed to make it a little bit more broad, because I did focus a lot of my modules on my biochem and motor control and all those kind of things. But I think it might have helped me a little bit more if I had kept it a bit broad and included those other modules that were a bit more kind of like, I don't want to say less sciencey, but they're a bit more, you were talking to people about ethics around things, and I think stuff like that relates to teaching a little bit more.
And Dan, having gone kind of a completely kind of different route, would you have picked to do biomed?
I think hindsight is a very good thing, and I might get a few scowls from this call by saying, honestly, knowing what I know now, I would scrap biomed and I would have done computer science. But there's absolutely no way as a kid I would have, doing my GCSEs, doing my A-levels, would have gone into learning how a hard drive works, which is completely boring, to learning how the heart or the brain works, which is absolutely fascinating. So there's absolutely no way I would have conceivably gone into computing so early. And thankfully that I did do a degree like biomedical science or anything. When you do something like sciences, employers know, this person must be pretty switched on. They must have good problem solving skills. They must be quite adaptable. So thankfully, because I did a degree like that, I could then just completely take a U-turn and go into something completely, kind of unrelated. So I don't really regret doing biomed, but knowing what I know now, I probably would have gone straight into computing.
Yeah, I find it similar. Like, I've spoken with my boss since, and obviously transport and logistics is kind of very far from science. But he said that one of the things that made him kind of say like yes to employing me was the science degree. And as you said, the problem solving, like we have a lot of problem solving to do.
Yeah.
And just the kind of with the research projects, having kind of a lot of plates to spin at the same time, I think helped a lot. And like in my job now, we have so many things happening at the same time, and you kind of dotting around and all that. And I do think biomed does help with that. Tommy, would you still have picked kind of pharmacology, or would you have gone straight for medicine?
Yeah, I think just logistically, it would have been a lot easier, a lot cheaper if I got in like the first time. But I definitely think my journey has been very interesting, and because of like how all-encompassing medicine can be as a career, like even starting now, it's very, it takes a lot from me, and it's very hard to like branch outside of that. So I think my journey has allowed me to, to explore different like industries, like the year that I did work in corporate, I had no idea that industry existed, and I probably wouldn't have known about it if I'd gone into medicine straight, and even like doing pharmacology as well, like, working in the lab, like that's something, I never thought I would see myself doing, but I actually did enjoy. So I think, yeah, my journey has definitely been a bit more interesting. So yeah.
Did you think kind of going into it when you were a little bit older and having experience under your belt has helped, just in terms of kind of like talking to patients and
Yeah, 100%. Because I was like looking back, I'm quite an introverted person, but I was like really shy back then. So yeah, I don't think 17, 18-year-old me was really like prepared like with the reality of actually working with patients and actually working and choosing this as a career. But I think definitely it has, being a bit older has definitely helped me, and I think gives you a lot of perspective.
And is there any kind of advice you would give to 17, 18-year-olds that are picking degrees, kind of knowing what you know now? Is there any, other than it's quite expensive if you kind of end up doing a few different things, is there anything any advice that you would give?
I would definitely say just like say yes to like a lot of things, like it's very easy to have an idea of what you want to be or what you think what you want to do or what you think you should do, but just try and be open. But it's very hard because especially when you're told to like you have to have a certain like set of A levels to go down this path, and it's very rigid. But I think just be very open to like different things. Yeah.
No, so I think it's I forgot what my point was going to be then. I'll go with Hannah. And hopefully my point will come back.
I think just speak to as many people as you possibly can. I don't think it matters what degree you're doing. I think just as long as you make the effort to speak to as many people, because you can gain so much from everyone. I mean, even just in part-time jobs, I think even just working part-time at a pub while I was at university and having the opportunity to speak to such a diverse range of people in that job helped me so much and gave me so much like social confidence. And I feel like that's helped me in my teaching massively, because you're not always just going to come across like-minded people. You are going to have such a range of people who, if you can't converse with, if you can't adapt yourself to, you are going to struggle, I think. So it's a really important life skill to learn. And like Tommy said, just not turning down opportunities and saying yes wherever you can, but then at the same time not wearing yourself too thin, which is a hard balance to have, and to just not put too much pressure on yourself either. I think me and Eve definitely we're two people who put a lot of pressure on ourselves at university, and I think a lot of the time we were kind of just, I don't know, shooting ourselves in the foot because we were putting the pressure on ourselves and other people weren't, and we didn't really need it because we're holding ourselves to account anyway. So yeah, just don't stress yourself out, I don't think.
Yeah, my point I've remembered now, it kind of links to both your piece of advice, was just that there's so many jobs that you don't know exist. If that makes, like, there's, you when you're at school, you're told you can be a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, but there's so many other industries that you just don't know exist. And with science, you have the ability to kind of go like where you want to go, and it's talking to the right people, using LinkedIn, all those kind of things to the best of your ability to kind of see what is out there. And I mean, I particularly feel like Dan in tech, there'll be jobs that like don't exist now that in 10 years will be kind of at the forefront, and there'll be way more opportunities. And I do think science does really just give you that. Dan, have you got any kind of advice that you would give?
Yeah, I think we all know that it's incredibly hard for someone so young to kind of make a decision that could potentially lead the way for the rest of their life. It's very, very hard. Thankfully, we do live in kind of like an environment that's quite flexible. I'd say like there's two main points of advice that I would give. I would say, don't get tunnel vision. I was quite set on doing medicine, and I think there were red flags very early on that medicine wasn't for me. So I think I was so set on doing medicine, I kind of chased it. And potentially kind of, shouldn't have even done biomed in the first place. I should have kind of realized a little bit sooner. So just be a bit more flexible, weigh up your options, do a pros and cons list. Just don't get tunnel vision on like one thing that you want to do. The other thing is don't listen to sales pitch too much. I think, it's very easy for people to sell jobs like, this one pays a lot, or, this one you can work from home. What you should be doing is asking people, what's the worst part of your job? What's the least thing that you look forward to? What do you don't like getting out of bed to do this kind of thing? Because that's what you learn more from those kind of questions. Like, what do you hate the most about your job? and it gives you a little bit more of an insight of kind of like the tasks that you're going to have to face when you do that role, is what I would say.
Perfect, thank you. They were all really good. Kind of coming to the end, possibly, of the panel discussion, and I was just wondering if any of the audience members have any questions that they would like to ask.
I've got one for Eve. How useful is your biology in shipping? Your knowledge of biology?
I'm not gonna lie, there's not a huge amount, but before we joined the call, we had a kind of a little chat beforehand, and I do a lot of work for one company that ships fertilizer all around the world, and a lot of the fertilizer is hazardous goods. So for me to be able to ship that, I had to do it's called a DG, like dangerous goods course. And, to know what can't be shipped with what and all that kind of thing. So I did find that relatively easy, because there was people doing the course and they didn't know kind of what basic meant and what organic chemicals, whereas I had a bit of an idea of what that was. I'd say that's probably the main part biology wise. But I do just think the transferable skills from like biology in general that you get from uni, obviously it's essay based and there's like numbers based, so you've got kind of the best of both worlds there. I was saying before the call that, so we obviously with the situation in Ukraine at the moment, can be used as explosives. So their customs are very kind of hot on that. But we had a little bit of an issue where a pallet has managed to get onto a truck that it shouldn't be on, to France, and it should be in Norway, but it's not being declared. So the customs procedures to get it back, because of the kind of ADR class that it is, is quite difficult. But it's interesting, and to kind of know what's going on, essentially. Thank you. Roz, do you have a question? Is that your hand up?
Well, I want to say a huge thanks to all the participants, and I think my first is going to just be a statement about what a broad base biological science is, that allows people to go off and explore different things and pick up different skills. But there's so much more to being at university and a degree than actually the stuff you learn in the labs, or the direct skills. Hannah's mentioned something about juggling pub jobs and as well as work, and the skills she developed. I just wondered whether any Eve or Dan or Tommy had sort of extracurricular type things, whether it was clubs or work experiences or whatever, that you felt actually gave was a sort of bonus to the degree, but that actually has informed career decisions and helped you.
I would definitely say just kind of the general thing of going to uni. Obviously, when you go, you're 18, you live at home, not had a huge amount of independence, and then when you go, you're kind of fending for yourself, and I think it just does make you become a way more confident person. Like at the labs that we did at uni, you're given a seating plan, so you get put next to who you're sat next to, and that's kind of it for the year. So you have to make those conversations. You have to you just interact with a way broader range of people than you probably ever have. I just think the general kind of going to uni, the social experience, helps massively with confidence, and it just means then going to a job interview, you're so much more confident, and going into a workplace, there's so many people in a workplace, so many different people that you have to get on with, essentially. And I just think uni is a nice stepping stone for that.
Yeah, I think just reinforcing that point, I extracurricular, I captain the School of Biomed and other things now. I can't really remember what the school's title is now. It changed. I captained the football team for 2 years, and it kind of just working with people is something that I wanted to do, and just it's always nice to work with people, and people are the most interesting thing in the world, in my opinion. So just working as a team is very, very nice, and just, you know, appreciating other people's skills and abilities and kind of getting the best out of people is just something I knew that I wanted as kind of like a career. It might not seem like cybersecurity is team orientated. It absolutely is. Like any computing project, you're working as a big team, so it's all about, you know, working with people's different abilities. But yeah, just reinforcing the main point that you made at the very, very start before asking the question. It's just university is very, very character developing. You do kind of, it does highlight what you're good at and maybe what you're not so good at, but it does develop a lot, mostly social skills, and being able to stick to a task. Because I think before this, school is very much like, here's your timetable, this is what you're going to do. Whereas now in university, it's very much over to you, and you have to prepare, and you have to kind of manage your own time. You have to, you know, you go to lectures obviously, but how you carry out a long project like a research project, you have to timetable all of that, and that's something that absolutely will cross over into any job.
Definitely. And Tommy, did you have any kind of thing?
I know, I was just going to agree. I definitely agree with like that point. Like just uni, it does set you up, because that's kind of the first time like you're, you know, into the world as per se, especially because my parents, they're originally like from Nigeria, so it was just me. So it's kind of like the first time that, you know, I was in a different country, you know, no support, just my brother. So yeah, definitely, you know, yeah, uni is what sets you up and it allows you to explore who you are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Am I here to ask?
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, it's been absolutely fantastic hearing where you've all ended up. It's absolutely brilliant. I wanted to ask if you had to give a piece of advice to this year's finalists coming up to Christmas, you know, 6 months till I graduate, what piece of advice would you give them? What nugget of that's going to set them off on their path for the future?
I would definitely say don't leave the write-up of your project till the last minute. Not you don't want to be, you know, at least have kind of a plan, and not obviously have a plan, but yeah, not be like rushing the day before, because I think as well with the science projects, it's slightly different to say like an arts project, where because you're doing the research, you can't write up everything until you've finished, if that makes sense. Obviously you can write your introduction and you can write things, but it's all very tailored to the result that you get. So yeah, I found that I maybe should have given myself a little bit more time at the end to, I mean, it was fine, it went all right, but yeah, we could have done without the stress. Hannah, do you have?
Ooh, yeah, just mirroring what you said, don't leave it all to the last minute, because it saves you a lot of stress and heartache. But just that it's all worth it in the end, because the feeling when you do finish is just amazing, very overwhelming, but it's definitely worth it. And I feel like when you're in that situation, I can remember thinking at that time, you hear all the people who graduated raising that point. They say, oh, it's all worth it in the end, and you'll get there. And you just can't see the end being in sight. And I think it's very easy to have that tunnel vision and to just think, no, this is just going to go on forever and I'm always going to be stuck in this stressful state. But you do end up getting there, because you always do, and everyone always manages to finish. So yeah, just to not give up, and yeah, try and schedule your time as best you can. As much as it seems like a drag in the short term, it definitely helps out big time in the long term. And I used a piece of software on my research project, which I always shout from the rooftops about, because I feel like nobody knows about it. And it's kind of like a thing that makes all your graphs for you. And it was called GraphPad Prism Pro, I think. But you can do like a 40-day free trial. I think it normally costs about £300, but you can have a 40-day free trial. And I made all my graphs look absolutely amazing. And yeah, I got a lot of compliments from my my tutor about how good my graphs were. So that's a tip if anybody needs to make graphs.
Anne or Tommy, do you have anything that you would add?
First of all, don't envy any of them. I think if I had to do a research project again, I'd lose all my hair. Two of them was far too much. So best of luck with the research projects and all the exams that follow. I would say that try and do a little bit each day. So I think everyone has the maximum amount of like mental load they can take, and there's only so many research projects you can actually read and take in each day. So just, even if it's a Sunday, and you're only reading one, then that's better than nothing at all, because everyone hits that wall after working so much. And if you leave it so late, you're going to get to a point where, okay, for a few hours you've done really good work, but after that you're just so tired and you can't take a break, that the work that you're creating after that wall is just not really good enough. So prepare early on. Obviously that's a really good bit of advice from me too, but I would just say, just try and do a little bit each day. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I guess I'll echo the time management thing and just enjoy it, because I remember when the week I had to hand in my research project, that was the day that the week they announced lockdown. So definitely enjoy the experience, like manage your time, but enjoy the experience as well, because you just don't know when next, you'll be able to like see your friends. Yeah, because I think that for my core, it was a bit of a weird situation, finishing our degrees, yeah, middle of lockdown, but just enjoy it. It's stressful, but just enjoy it as much as you can, even though it may not seem very joyful in the moment, but yeah, try to.
I think your hand-in date was the day before the national lockdown, wasn't it? For all year group. Yeah,
it was stressful.
I've got another question, if I may. I work with undergraduate students, and one of the things they worry about, particularly in their third year, is what the hell they're going to do their final year, what the hell they're going to do the next year, and when they should be planning it, and when they should be applying, and should they be spending time doing lots of online applications and fretting over it, or does it all fall into place, and when do you have to apply? So a question to all of you: when did you work out what you were going to do, and when did you then do something about it? Was it during your final year? Was it after you'd finished and then you started looking around and there's still time and it's happened? Just a little bit about when do you think about the next step if you're in that really crazy final year?
I think I definitely fell into that trap of being panicked by everybody else being panicked, and I think that's potentially why I applied for my master's in dietetics without really fully thinking it through, because I think I applied literally 2 days before the deadlines for applications, which meant, unfortunately, on the day that I did hand in my research project, I then had an interview for my dietetics masters. So while all my friends went off to celebrate, I had to stress myself out and prepare for this interview. But yeah, I think definitely don't rush into it. You've definitely got time, even if it means you take a year between finishing university and starting your next endeavour. That's a year well spent, definitely. Even if it's not starting in a career that you know that you're going to be in for the next few years, it's still worth it, because in that time I definitely made a difference to me. I did my U-turn on dietetics, and then I considered teaching, and then for the best part of last year I worked on supply as a cover supervisor in schools, and I was sent to some quite deprived areas and some quite difficult schools, and as you can imagine, working on supply is tough at the best of times. So in these quite difficult schools, I was definitely kind of had the baptism of fire with teaching, but it just made me love it even more. So if I hadn't have had that year in between graduating and going into a career, I wouldn't have experienced that, and I might have not gone into teaching. So yeah, definitely don't rush into it. You've got all the time in the world. You're on your own path, your own journey. Just go at your own pace.
Thank you. What about the rest of you?
I would say I would echo what Hannah said completely. But if you do want to do graduate schemes, they open and close earlier than you anticipate, or than I anticipate anyway. So kind of for a lot of the big science ones, kind of your applications are closing in September, October of your final year, which I wasn't too aware of. So kind of when as you say, everyone around you is talking about what they're doing, kind of got into the panic at the start of third year. And then a lot of the schemes that I may have applied for had kind of closed because I'd missed my chance with that. So I would say if there are graduate schemes you want to do, get in there early. But there's nothing wrong with kind of waiting a year if that, and kind of deciding what you want to do, not rushing into things. Because I always joke at work, all the, your boring pension stuff. When I log on to the site, it tells me how long I've got until I retire. And I think when I last saw it, it was like 44 years. So we've got a lot of time to make changes, do different things. And I think the world is kind of slightly different. I mean, like my mum's been in the same job for 30 years, and I don't think that happens as much now. There's a lot of, you can change, you can have kind of 3 essentially different careers within one kind of lifetime, which maybe didn't happen as much. So if you do pick the wrong thing, there's time to change and it's time to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, I would just say, unfortunately, we do live in the real world and there are time limits to things and windows. I think especially graduate schemes, they're very, very tight windows. Not every company just hires throughout the year. Second degrees, again, they obviously have application windows. So you do still live in the real world and you still have to abide by many, many deadlines. So you should know at least well in advance when your window kind of opens and when it closes. But again, if you can take the time, then do so. That is a privilege that you shouldn't take advantage of, because I went straight from doing my master's to going straight into a job, and I wish I'd taken a bit more time just to kind of weigh up my options. Weigh up, potentially get like multiple offers, weigh up multiple offers. Because I did apply during my course. There was a week where I had three interviews and 1 exam. So that could be a reality if you're applying for multiple jobs whilst you're currently on your course. So I needed to do that to get into a certain window, but there is obviously drawbacks to that of not taking your time.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with everything that's been said, but again, like there is no pressure, on the thing. I mean, I was kind of like forced to take the time out. So I think definitely if you do find yourself that you have like time, maybe just, try and see other ways you can like develop yourself. Like it can be as small as like starting up like a little side project or taking a course, but there is no pressure whatsoever.
Can I ask how far you were affected in your decisions by the financial consequences now? This is my first degree a very long time ago, but we didn't end up with a debt. But you presumably got financial pressures from that. And how far has that affected you, the costs you incurred, as it were?
I would say this is coming from probably quite a privileged position. I dare look sometimes how much debt I'm in from student finance, but it's almost not real debt. And I know that's really bad to say, but because it's done on a percentage of your income over a certain amount, I think when you're earning like £30,000, you pay £5 a month.
I think I know the 2 highest brackets. The top bracket is £40 a month, and that's if you're earning over 34,000 a year. And then I think it's £20 if it's between 30 and 34. I think I had an email like a month ago or something.
Yeah. So it's when you're kind of, that sounds ridiculous to say when kind of you say you're in £50,000 worth of debt or whatever it is, that it kind of doesn't affect it just because it is such a little amount. there's kind of all the arguments that, you know, it might be the wrong way for the government to go about it, and then obviously it's written off. I think we're all still in the bracket where it is written off after 30 years. So I've not massively been affected by that, but obviously that is coming from a really kind of privileged.
I have to say, with regards to teaching, one thing that I've found quite frustrating is that there's bursaries offered by the government for certain teacher training courses and not others. So at the minute, PE will never receive a bursary because it's very oversubscribed, and that's my own choice to go into PE. But they decide some years and other years not to award bursaries for, say, the sciences, or to award bursaries for English or modern foreign language or maths, and it can be quite hit and miss. So I know that there's a girl on my skit course who last year, if she'd applied for English, she'd have got a £15,000 bursary. The year that she applied, she gets nothing, and then next year they're offering a £15,000 bursary again. And again, it's not a loan, that's just money that you're being given by the government. So I think it should be definitely a lot more standardised, and I don't think it's fair to just offer it's up to £30,000 for some subjects, and when you qualify as a teacher, you can switch. Once you've got your qualified teacher status, you don't have to stay within the subject that you qualify within. And I know for myself, because I'm doing PE with EBAC and I'm training within science, after I qualify I can go on to be a full-time science teacher, whereas I won't have received any of the benefits from these £27,000 bursaries that other students are getting for training in science. So that frustrates me a little bit in terms of the money side of things. But like Eve said regarding the debt, I think you're lured into a false sense of security because you feel like everyone has this debt who's been to university, and I feel like you end up within crowds and friendship groups of people where all of you have gone to university, so you're all carrying around this debt, and so it's almost like safety in numbers. You think, well, everyone's in the same boat, so it can't be that bad. But I'm just worried about the government potentially decreasing the amount of like annual income you have to have before you start paying it back, and I don't like that they can change the interest on the loans. I think it should stick to what it was when you got the loan. They shouldn't be able to move the goalposts. I don't think that's very fair, but yeah.
So just on student finance, for me, it's just kind of like a premium Netflix subscription every month, which isn't a lot, I think. The way student finance works is you have to earn over a certain amount, and then it's based on how much you earn. And realistically, none of us are probably ever going to scratch the surface of the interest. So in terms of kind of the experience that's paid for, the teaching that's paid for, and you're not even paying off any of the original sum, and it gets written off over 30 years, I think that is something to bear in mind. I don't think anyone I've known, might not disclose this, or anyone ever has kind of been really, really punished by the amount they're paying in student finance in the bracket B that they've just released that we're all on. So I think it is all relative. And a lot of people don't actually end up paying anything towards their student finance for many years into their employment. So I think more, I would say, on the finance perspective is if you do a second degree, the financing from student finance isn't the same. So if you're like doing a second degree like I did, then you don't get a maintenance loan, I believe. They just give you like a part of the tuition fee. So a lot of people have to end up taking second jobs, which alongside doing a master's, that's a huge amount of work. So that's the biggest consideration, I would say, rather than actually paying the interest on student finance if you're doing a second degree.
Yeah, I definitely second that, because I would, if I didn't have the luxury of being able to live at home this year, because teaching year isn't paid, I wouldn't be able to do it. That would exclude me from being able to do it, because I wouldn't be able to afford to be self-sufficient and not have a job. And this year is just so incredibly stressful. I would not have enough time to work even a part-time job. Even if it was just like evenings or weekends, I just would not have time. So yeah, I think they're wanting to make teaching a lot more accessible, but then they're putting up these barriers at the same time. And because you have to have a degree in order to train or apply to be a teacher in the first place, and it is going to be that second degree. So obviously you're not getting the maintenance loan. And I think, yeah, they're relying on people being able to turn to their parents for help. Which again, if you're coming from less well-off background and you don't have that stability in your home life, I think it's not fair to be excluding those people from certain careers. But yeah.